Welcome to The Brave Journey Within with Jim and Jenn. This show is about the spiritual journey and all of the challenges, healing, wisdom, and consciousness expansion experienced along the way.
Welcome to another edition of The Brave Journey Within with Jim and Jen. Welcome, Jen.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Well, we have a fun episode for you today. We're going to get a little weird, although we kind of always get a little weird, which is fun.
Yeah, we always do get a little weird. Yeah, but this is a little weirder than weird.
So, I know we want to get into some of David Paulides. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly, but his organization, which I think is called Can-Am, which is people that go out and try to solve missing persons cases. And his show, or I guess it's a series of books, and then also movies and a YouTube channel and stuff, is called Missing 411. And perhaps 2 years ago, he wrote, or no, he produced a movie called Missing 411. And was it the UFO connection? That's what it was.
Yeah, I've only watched some of his shows and they're always fascinating.
Yeah. So I was just going through his latest episode because he's pretty consistent, um, with all these missing persons cases that, it's kind of frightening that you have no idea how many things go on around you that you never know about.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing, right? Like, you don't know of everything that happens around you, and these things are happening all the time or in certain parts of the country, um, which is interesting, as it relates to missing persons. And one of the things that I learned watching him is that there's certain areas, almost like the Bermuda Triangle, if you want to call it that, but just like certain hot spots where people tend to go missing. And a lot of it is just unexplained and bizarre.
It really is so bizarre. Some of those stories are incredible. Like
Yeah.
I remember some of the ones I've watched where it's like even kids will disappear and end up miles in wilderness, far, far away from where they disappeared without shoes. A lot of them end up without shoes for some reason. And it's just so bizarre and strange. And there's
Yeah.
no real like easy explanation for how things could happen the way they did.
So well, maybe there is an easy explanation.
Maybe.
So there's those cases which I think we'll maybe get into some of them that we want to share, maybe. And then also, I don't know, would you say like the multiverse or like other dimensions,
Yeah, we're
parallel dimensions? Not,
yeah,
I know
we're
we
we're
might
not
not
just
necessarily go into that, but
yeah, we're not just in this one physical reality. There's a lot more going on.
yeah, it was interesting. I think I might have shared this before, but I was invited to have a meeting with a physics professor out from California and a pilot, uh, very accomplished pilot, and a hypnotherapist, and then me. And we were talking about past life regression and spirituality, among other things. And I asked, well, the pilot didn't believe anything. He was like, "This is all nonsense. I've never seen a UFO." Although he said his dad was involved in NASA, and there was one thing that he couldn't explain, but that he didn't buy it. But then the physics professor, I asked him, "Have you ever seen anything?" And this is in San Diego, which, if you know anything about UFOs, is has some of the best evidence recorded by U.S. Navy pilots. One of the more famous cases, really, in the last, 7 years? It was an event that happened 20 years ago, but was recorded by, uh, I believe they were F-18 pilots. They call these the Tic Tac videos.
Hmm.
Um, And so it was 2004. I think the USS Nimitz was the carrier out in the ocean in San Diego. Anyway, I asked this professor, "Hey, do you know anything about this?" And he goes, "Well, the government came up to my door one day and said, 'Could you please take a look at these and let us know your opinion?'"
Wow.
And I was surprised that he shared it, but he was like, "Yeah." He's like, "That looks like something out of this world." Although it could have been maybe in the world, I don't know, but maybe that was an out of the world one because there's both.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. I think, when you're talking about the pilot, I think we see what we're open to. These things are in the sky all over the place, and if you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss it. And sometimes it's even cloaked, or you just don't see it. So I don't know. I bet he's seen more than he realizes.
Well, those that video in particular kind of forced the government to, like, acknowledge, okay, these things something exists, which that was I mean, that happened 7 years ago now. The government admitted this, which is so funny because if you ask a lot of people now, like, "Are UFOs real?" or whatever, a lot of people are like, "Well, there's no evidence
Right, I know.
except for the evidence."
Except for all the evidence.
Yeah.
There's so much evidence, I know. Yeah. Well, I think more and more people are believing and understanding that it is a reality of some kind. Maybe we don't fully understand all of it, but there is definitely something else from not of Earth, or maybe just things that we don't even understand or can't explain, and maybe even inner Earth. Who knows? There's definitely things going on
Yeah.
that
So
we can't
before
explain.
before I wrap up with this physics professor, one of the things that I had said was something that I had come across, and it was that the speed of light is not necessarily the speed of light. Like, there are things that can go faster than the speed of light. And
Wow.
the pilot jumped on me right away, like, "Well, that's just nonsense." And the physics professor said, "Actually, that is not nonsense." And started going into I can't remember what studies and what particles can move faster than the, speed of light, and I was like, "Thank God you were here because I wouldn't have had that sort of knowledge." I'm just I guess part of how my mind works is I'm open to that, or I hear something like that, and it is immediately triggers, like, "You should pay attention to that."
What a great conversation. I wish I was part of it.
It was super interesting, and then the other part was the theory of the multiverse. I had no idea that that was, like, an actual theory in, I guess, physics, quantum physics, that you could have multiple dimensions, you know, almost infinite around you and not know, and not see it.
It's funny with the word dimension. I've heard so many explanations about what dimension even is. And so I know a lot of people, I've asked other people, what do you think a dimension is? There's always different answers. No one seems to have a clear understanding, or they might have an understanding in their own way of seeing things. Um, but dimension is it's like a different space. It's a different way of being. So when I think of dimensions and when I've asked my guides, they say there are infinite dimensions. Some people talk about us, moving from third dimension to fifth dimension. And there's like that sort of understanding of it. And then some people refer to it as almost like if it's like the multiverse, it's like a parallel existence or something like that. So if you're out there confused about what the word dimension means, join the club. I think a lot of people would. I don't think there's really one way of describing it. There's different possible meanings to it. But I have an interesting story too. I multiple times I've experienced, if you want to call it the multiverse, where there's like another version of us somewhere.
Mhm.
We're I'm Jen Palmer somewhere else, and you're Jim O'Neill somewhere else, and there's other experiences playing out. And I've had multiple experiences where I entered into what felt like a parallel reality, but I was living a very different life. And I wasn't dreaming, I wasn't asleep. I literally was doing my own thing. One time in particular, I was at work. It was before I opened up my wellness center, and I was at work and I was doing things and I was getting ready to stand up and go see a client of mine. And before I stood up, I suddenly entered into this different reality where I was standing in this yard and I had a house and I was standing near a tree and I had a husband and the husband was standing on a ladder and I knew I was me. And but I also knew that this reality, like, it was real. It felt just as real as the one we're in now, but everything was so different there. Like, the house was not my house in this reality and everything else. And I was in there, I'm guessing, for maybe 15 seconds. It's hard to tell time. And then I came back to this reality and I was like, whoa, what just happened? It was so strange. And then I had another one where again, I was me and I was in this restaurant and I was talking with some not so great people, and I was getting into a bad situation, and I was set up by somebody, and I was very aware of it. But in that moment, I was living it out, and that lasted, I think, for probably more like a minute or two, maybe a couple minutes, and then I came back into this reality and realized, whoa, I think that was another version of me.
So that would be more like a parallel life type of thing?
I think so. We only know so much about all of this, and You know, when I connect with my guides trying to figure things out, a lot of times, because I don't go into trance. So when I'm connecting, I am more consciously aware of what's happening. And so when I try to connect with my guides about things, I can only really understand deeply what's where there's a foundation for understanding, if that makes sense. Because it's got to come through my filter, my reality, my distortion to come into some sort of understanding. And so, as human nature does, when you're given information about anything, it has to fit somewhere in your understanding. So, I think
Sure.
there's a lot more to it than I think any of us really realize. But I'm always open to understanding, and I love these conversations because it just blows my mind. This reality that we're in, it's not the only thing happening, and
But
we have all these dimensional spaces that are like, we have like different realms. Some people see fairies or more like nature beings and things like that, and then you might have like dragons, and so there's all these layers of experiences and realities that are all like together.
well,
And-
before we go down that rabbit hole, maybe, let's circle back to missing 411,
yeah.
because that caught my attention because David Paulides is a former detective, and he's very, sort of left brain, and so as he's investigating and, like, coming to this conclusion, or maybe not necessarily giving you the conclusion, but presenting some facts about things that help you get there. What were maybe some of the cases or the things that you saw, um, that caught your attention in regards to his work with missing 411?
One of the things that I remember seeing, and it's been a while since I've looked at his work, but there was one case in particular, I think it was a little boy, if I remember right, where he was literally standing right behind his parents. They turned around for a second and turned their back on him for literally a second, turned back around. He was gone, nowhere to be found, just could not be found. And how did that happen? There's no people, there's no animals, there's no logical explanation for how this child disappeared. What happened? So of course my mind goes crazy knowing that, things aren't always what they seem. I've always wondered, could there have been a portal that opened where he was taken? Or maybe there was a beam from above from an alien ship that pulled him up and out. I don't know, but it's so fascinating to think about and to also realize that, it isn't what it seems.
I think what is amazing is how many of these cases exist.
Oh, so true.
Um, there was one, I'm not even sure it was in the movie, about the possible UFO connections, It was where a guy was hiking with his friend in Mount Shasta in California, and I think he even has, like, a photo of his buddy, and you could see these footprints going up, and then something happens either I don't know if he changes the film in the camera or something. He looks back, and his friend is just gone, and there's no footprints. There's where could he possibly have gone? It doesn't make any sense. So you would s you go through your in your head like, "Well, did he kill him?" Or, like, how is there something more nefarious? Like, what would be a logical explanation for something like that? And, you're kinda left with, he's just disappeared. Like, it is like he just went through a portal and came out somewhere else, and he's not there anymore.
I can't remember. I think I might have heard it once from David Wilcock and something that he was talking about, but I remember hearing this was years ago about there being portals to the fairy realm and that people could enter and then also come back. And I can't remember everything he was saying about it, but I just remember thinking like, "Oh, that doesn't sound good." Like, but it would be like a really long time that they were gone, and it would only feel like minutes to them or something like that.
Mhm,
But so sometimes I think when people disappear, it's like, I don't know. I remember the first time I went to Sedona, I was going there for a retreat, and the friend I was going with had actually reached out to some of the local Native Americans to try to help us get like a really authentic experience there, right? And this was early on. This was probably maybe 13 years ago for me. And she connected with this one guy who said that he could help us enter into a portal, but there's no guarantee that we would come back. And I was like, well, maybe I'm not quite so ready for that.
mhm.
But it makes me wonder, I really don't think that that was some sort of fake lore, or something that's untrue. I really do think that this guy who was very authentic knew what he was talking about and knew a lot more about these experiences than we do.
I mean, that stuff has existed forever. If you're
Mhm.
curious, you can learn more about, uh, golly, like the Fae in, you know, Ireland, Scotland, that kinda stuff. Druids,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, lots of stuff there. Um, one of the, cases that I, looked at before, this episode was the case of, oh god, what's the guy's name? Um, uh, Carl what? It's a case in 1974. It's one of the, Carl Higdon. Okay. And so he's elk hunting. He's in, I think, Wyoming, and he sees 3 elk, and he lines up his shot, and he goes to take the shot, and he says time seemingly stops. So he fires his gun, he sees the bullet come out in slow motion, it hits something and just falls down. It doesn't go to the elk, and
Huh.
then there's some kind of cloaked spaceship or something that's protecting the elk, and then a being, human-like being, comes out and talks to him, and he throws him a packet of pills, and he says, "Take these." And so he does,
The
and
alien tells him to take.
I think he said it was, like, human-like or
Oh,
humanoid, like,
so it
it
was a
was
human. Okay.
I'm not sure. So but the guy, this is a famous case, I mean, he was
Huh.
investigated heavily for this claim. Um, he takes it, and he wakes up, and he's on the spaceship with these 3 elk that he was trying to hunt. He essentially gets abducted, and then he recounts his experience. I'm not sure exactly what happens, but he comes back, and he's like, "Ah, this weird thing happened," and He gets polygraphed like 3 times by the police. He gets, oh god, an evaluation by, like, the psychologists at the University of Wyoming, and they're all like, "This guy, something happened." And there was physical evidence, right? So we had this bullet that had hit this spaceship or whatever and all this other stuff. And this probably sounds, I mean, obviously fantastic. Highly recommend you watch the movie and the story. So David Paulides, I guess I'd interviewed him. I think he's since passed away. This happened in 1974, but it's just this amazing story of, you know, this craft and these beings that are like studying him and these elk, like these animals. Like it was clearly some kind of like a research scientific like study. Now, what that was, who knows? You know, I know
Seriously.
there's thoughts in the, you know, UFO world that these, well, I don't know, these potentially the Zetas, the Greys.
But if it's human, and if they're talking about taking pills, that means it's probably a human working with them at the very least, or it could be some sort of like secret space program or something, you know?
So it gets
Is it-
pretty wild. So the guy had tuberculosis and he had tuberculosis scars. And after he had taken these pills and this thing happened, they were completely gone.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen. So he had these health things that were healed. So that there was this healing involved in it as well, which
Wow. I
just
never
adds
heard of that story. That's amazing.
it's in the movie.
Yeah,
uh, Missing 411, the UFO connection.
I will watch that. It's right up my alley.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
that's some of those cases, like that one in particular, are interesting because there's evidence. This guy tells the story, and it's heavily investigated. So there's lots of you know firsthand accounts of what that was like, or like the medical stuff. Like, I mean, the guy got healed miraculously. Like that he was examined by medical doctors. There's a medical record, right? So it just adds to the claim anyway.
Wow. I know when, I've talked about Raymond Grace a few times. When I was taking his class, he had a good friend named Jeff, I think his name was, that got up and spoke. And he talks about energy and just when you're really saying you're going to be at the right place at the right time and really affirming that belief system so that you're always in the right place at the right time. And he told this one story, and it's happened to him a few times, but this one story, he was actually traveling to Raymond's house and he was going to, I think, be meeting somebody there. And I think if I remember right, the trip should have taken, I think he said about 8 hours or so. And he only had like 3 or 4 hours to get there on time because he was leaving late. And his intention was he was going to arrive on time, but that didn't make any sense. And intuitively, you would think, okay, I got to take all highways if I can get there as quickly as possible. Right? You think logically that's what you would think, but intuitively, he was getting the hit that he needed to take back roads. And he was like, well, that's going to take even longer, but okay. So he went and he noticed that suddenly there was like this older car and there was a woman who was wearing something that looked a lot older and she was carrying strange bags out of her trunk, which it just looked very strange to him, but he was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then before he knew it, he got to Raymond's house with minutes to spare. Like somehow he got there in 3 hours instead of eight. And he
Hmm.
does not know how that happened. But like he thinks that maybe he went through some sort of like an interesting portal or went through time and came back out through a different, like some sort of weird time portal. And they got there on time. So, but in order to get through that portal, he had to go the back roads, is what he was saying. So it's just kind of like there's so much we don't understand. And that the idea of time seems to be an aspect of this idea of portals where people, it's like they think it takes longer than it does, or they're gone longer than they realized and they truly were, or vice versa, and just time seems to be a thing with all of this. Just like you
I
were saying that time slowed down.
the time stuff can be weird,
Yeah,
you know? I know in some of the, sort of near death stuff that I've experienced where time seemingly stops or slows, that's unless you've experienced it, it's just super strange.
right?
And there is, I can't remember, some scientific explanation for some of that stuff, but, um, I mean, time bending or, like, time is an illusion, right? Like, it exists for our learning purposes, I think, on this planet, but it's not a real thing. Um, I can't remember who I was watching where they were talking about how impressed Spirit was that we invented clocks to measure something that doesn't exist so precisely.
That's so funny.
The precision of clocks that measure time
Huh.
and aid with navigation and everything else. But, um, time is super fascinating, right? Like, you talk about, like, performance and flow states where lots or large portions of time can feel like nothing at all. It's the blink of an eye.
I feel like every year is like that right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Does feel like it feels like it's going quicker, but does it seem exponentially quicker now?
It does to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like I blink and it's the end of the week. I'm like, "What just happened? What did I
yeah.
do this week? I don't even know." And I'm trying to be present with it, but it's just going so fast.
Well, it a lot of abduction cases too, um, there's missing time, right? Like what was the first one? Like Benny and Barney Hill or
Mhm.
Betty and Barney Hill. Um, that's a common feature where they're gone, come back, several hours have passed, and, you know, it seems like it's the next second.
I wanna go back to missing 411. So I know some of the people have been found and some weren't. With the ones that have been found, what are some of the strangest things that he talks about with, like, how they're found or, what are some of the things that you've heard with all of that?
I'm not as familiar with the ones where they have found people, like they went missing and they were found. I know there's a lot of like, their back or shoes or, like, a gun, right? Like, if it's a hunter that are found that are, like, untouched. Or okay, here's one that's wild. Sometimes with these searches, there's lots of people, technology. He was just talking about, someone potentially drowned in the river. They have, side sonars going in the rivers to find these bodies. Like there's drones now that can cover all kinds of distances, right? In addition to, more traditional, like helicopters and things. But one of the ones that I remember is they had searched this area extensively and found nothing, and then maybe a year later, saw these things, like, they were found untouched, like, where the heck did that come from? Because like,
Yep.
it doesn't make any sense, it defies logic. Um, those are the things that I could recall.
Yeah, and I just remember watching an interview with him where he was talking about why he started getting into all this because there were some missing persons in a state park, or maybe it was a national park, I can't remember, but at one of the parks there were missing people and they were very strange occurrences and there were no explanations, and even the park rangers knew there was something going on, and if I remember right, I don't even think they really wanted to talk about it because it was just so strange. But so he started getting involved and was looking into these things, and he was verifying that it's just so odd the things that are going on and how these things are happening. That there's clearly something. Now, of course, it makes your mind think, okay, maybe it's like, I like start thinking about Bigfoot. I start thinking of aliens. I start thinking of portals, like there's so many different strange possibilities that, have been thought about with all of this. What are some of your thoughts? What do you think it is? Do you think and maybe they're all different, who knows, but what do you think from your experience could be happening?
With some of these abductions,
Mhm.
well, Mount Shasta is interesting to me because there's a lot of mythology, if you want to call it that, stories about, the civilization of Telos that's like currently there. There's all kinds of UFO sightings there.
Mhm.
People have had all kinds of experiences, missing people. Like, did they go into that mountain and are they just living happily there? Like, who
Yeah.
knows? I
Maybe
don't
they think
know.
it's only been a few minutes, and on our end, it's like been 100 years, and it's like I
I
remember I watched a movie one time, and I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it was all about they entered in through some sort of portal, and in the portal, they were experiencing time just like we do here, but on the outside of the portal where they actually entered from is like every second was another year. And so it just kept speeding up and speeding up, and they just kept losing days. And when they finally came out, um, it was way beyond the time frame, and the Earth was, ruined. It was like there was no real inhabitation of Earth anymore. So they got saved by aliens. But
Mhm.
which it was a really neat show, though. It was fun to watch. But just the realization of the whole timepiece is just so fascinating to me. I don't know. I think there's
Well,
something to it.
so one theory is that the civilization Telos at Mount Shasta is connected to the origins or the civilization of Lemuria. So, one of the more advanced civilizations that existed prior to Atlantis.
Mhm.
Atlantis. So, I think Netflix did the Graham Hancock special. Was it a year ago, maybe? Where he basically they go in the Pacific in these different areas, and they kind of discover all these temples or monoliths and all these other things that supposedly couldn't have existed that do exist and don't fit in with sort of modern day archaeology's narrative.
Right?
So there's that. And then the from a ufology standpoint, um, well, maybe not ufology. I don't know. I don't know what realm this is anymore. But the Zetas or the Greys are a version of us. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that before
where
too.
we have sort of weeded out emotions and things that we may not have thought were necessary, um, and embraced technology, but in a not healthy way, to the point that their DNA started to degrade. So this was like they were trying to save their race basically, and they had all kinds of cloning technology and things like that. And part of the abductions that happen now are souls that volunteered to give their DNA to help them save their species. So it's a version of us in a different timeline coming back here to save their race.
Yeah, I
The
know
hybridization.
the first time I heard that, I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I was like, "That's just going too far."
Well, it's
But it's very plausible. I think with everything that we don't really understand and all the crazy experiences, and knowing that time and space is more of just a construct, it's not necessarily reality. Why not? Why wouldn't that be something that's happening?
well, you can kind of see how we might get there.
Right. Oh gosh, lately, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was the future timeline where we all just kind of like really we just screwed it up. I don't know. But maybe there's a better one now. Which comes back
Well,
to the whole idea of like the multiverse and parallel experiences and dimensional spaces and things like that. I don't know. Just so crazy.
that's I mean, everything is happening in the moment.
Yeah.
So, you know, their technology is far beyond us, right? Like our scientific instruments aren't at a level that they can detect certain things, or maybe you have to be at a certain vibration to see certain things.
Yeah. I
Why
don't know.
can I see something and someone else can't? Or, someone else can see spirits and the other person can't. Their radio is tuned in or open to a higher frequency, perhaps, or
Or
just
just a different frequency.
just a different, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no, good or bad with that. Uh, the Bashar has a documentary called First Contact where he talks about this. So Bashar is Essassani. Essassani is a hybrid of the Greys, the Zetas.
Oh yeah. I think I remember hearing him talk about that.
So they were successful with our help figuring out their DNA and being able to kind of revive themselves in this new, more evolved species, which is more positive. So there's a happy ending.
I'm sure that doesn't feel so good to the people who were abducted and had nothing but fear. And
Well, but did they choose that experience at a
well, I'm
soul
sure
level?
on some level, yeah. It's funny, my son, and I'm not sure if I talked about this before, but one of my sons, not my oldest, but my youngest one, he really did feel like he's experienced being abducted and woke up with a mark on his arm that he remembered seeing in his dream. And definitely had some crazy experiences, but it was more with Dracos and, like reptilian type beings. And
The Draco reptilians.
yeah, that's not so fun. They're pretty nasty. And I've come across them a few times, but when he told me about it, and
Not
he
all of them.
kept it to himself, but when he told me about it, I immediately, as soon as he started telling me about it, I started feeling the energy. It's almost like it was directed at me. And so then I started scanning him for any kind of energetic implants, and I found some. And I cleared them from him, and what was interesting is for a while he was acting like more irritable, more angry. And we just kept thinking, like, well, he's a young adult, hormones, I don't know. We were just trying to figure it out. And then as soon as I cleared that, all of that weird, angry, aggressive kind of energy he had disappeared. It was gone. So whatever they did with him, they clearly did something. And he had had a previous experience too, where he felt like time disappeared. And he was younger, and we can't remember how young he was, but it was bedtime, 9 o'clock, and we put him into bed. And he remembers looking at the window, and he used to always look for UFOs out the window. And he remembers seeing one, and then at around midnight or maybe a little after midnight, he comes walking into my bedroom. And I'm like, honey, what are you doing still up? You need to get to bed. And he felt like it had only been a minute. And he very clearly remembered that and was really confused about, what time it actually was. And so he really thinks that he got taken and that they've been tracking him. And so I don't know. It's just so crazy, all of it.
Well, uh, one of the cases that is featured in Missing 411 is a hunter who he was a guide. So he's not just like a, hobby hunter. He's an expert at craft. And he went into a place where he had been many times and disappeared, and there's no trace. And in the course of the investigation, uh, David Paulides asked his girlfriend, "Did he, ever say anything strange happened out in the woods?" And sure enough, she's like, "What do you mean strange?" He's like, "Just anything strange." And she goes, a few months ago, he talked about he was going into the woods and he saw this UFO like following him,
Mm.
this light, and he told her about it. And it wasn't, too long after that he just disappeared without a trace.
Wow.
So it's interesting. Now,
Yeah.
there is I know when I say Draco reptilians, you feel a certain type of way about that, but there are positive Draco reptilians.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I know. These
Okay.
were not. They were not good. I'm not positive at all. Yeah, I could tell by the energy, it really was not helpful. It was not good.
Yeah. Have you ever, come across Rob Gauthier?
No.
Does that name mean anything?
I love
He,
this because you and I follow different people, and so it's like this beautiful melding of information. I love this.
so in Sedona this weekend, he will be there with, like, Ruben Langdon, Maureen St. Germain,
Mhm,
Linda Moulton Howe, who's done
mhm.
a lot of investigations, um, with if you've seen Ancient Aliens, you've probably seen her. Um, she has a book and a documentary on like Antarctica and UFO stuff there. There's some crazy stuff going on in Antarctica. But anyway, they're all getting together in Sedona this weekend. Uh, but Rob Gauthier channels two Draco reptilians, I think. One is Treb, and the other is Aradif. Aradif, I think. Um, but he's a very fascinating person and channel. He's a very interesting story. He's been on Ruben Langdon's show interview with Extra Dimensionals, um, but yeah, these Dracos that he channels are fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know. I know they exist. My guides have told me positive ones exist. I've not ever experienced positive ones that I'm aware of. I tend to steer clear if I can help it.
Well,
But
you
yeah,
need to
I guess
listen to Rob Gauthier to cleanse your palate.
cleanse my palate. Yeah, well, and that's funny because I literally taste the energy. When anything that's detrimental or harmful comes around, I can taste it. So yeah, cleanse my palate. That would be
Because
amazing.
we've talked about remote viewing in the CIA, Rob Gauthier, well, how he sort of became a channel, he started doing the gateway process.
Oh,
He was doing the heavy thing, meditation. He overcame like a serious addiction issues and got sober and started meditating a lot and did those binaural beats from hemisync, and then opened up and became a channel. So a lot of
yeah,
times,
beautiful.
people like that or who have gifts have gone through some type of trauma, near death type of stuff, and then their consciousness opens up and they tune into the cosmic radio.
There's a lot to tune into out there.
Yeah. So what? Channeling, well, they're all meeting in Sedona, so there's going to be some interesting things there. So if anyone is in Sedona or going out there, that would probably be a very fascinating group of people to come across. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're all. I I don't know if the community is growing or more people are just talking about their experiences. Obviously, in Sedona, it's one of those places that they supposedly, the veil is thinner there. Um,
Mhm.
and if you're thinking about, spaceships and other things hiding out in plain sight, that's one place they might be.
They are definitely there.
Say more. What have you seen?
Yeah, I went there with I ran a retreat and I forget how many of us were there, maybe 12 of us. And we went to I think it was called Schnebly. It's a like a dirt road going up a hill and you're basically overlooking Sedona. And we got there and I had my, everything that you do, with the laser pen and, we were in meditative state. We called in love and we started seeing them. And there was a bunch of them up there that night. And I don't know if they were all ours or all someone else, I don't know where they were from or what they were doing, but we could tell they were there. And so I just took my laser when I knew it was safe and nobody was going to be riding around. I just kind of circled their ship and then they would move with lights off. Like they didn't want us to see it, but you could see them move. And then they would stop and I would do it again. And then they would move in a different way, and then they just literally, you could see it move away. They didn't want us to see it. And then there were other ones where we were just like, "All right," telepathically, "if you can hear us and understand us, shine your light." And they did. They blasted their light, and then they turned it off again. And then you could see them move, and then they blast their light and turn it off again. It was fascinating. I don't know how many were up there, but there were a bunch. And I
Um,
don't know if they were all ours, but whoever it was in that one specifically, they were telepathically communicating with us.
so
And it didn't
just
feel bad. It didn't feel negative.
to be clear, when Jen says we're not sure if it's otherworldly, extra dimensional, or domestic.
Right. We
So
don't know.
there is, well, I mean, everyone will know Area 51 or S4, like these other, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and all these other things that have these super advanced technology that is far beyond what people would realize, right? Like it's perhaps from other people, other beings. um, Someone we both know, Whitney, if I could, she has some amazing footage of UFOs in Sedona.
Yeah, that was from
Um,
that trip.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
that was
she
that trip.
showed that to me.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, there was a
I mean,
lot
that's
going on that night. We went to different locations each night, and one of the locations, we saw some things that we felt like, maybe, it looked like it wasn't a satellite and it wasn't plain. It was something interesting, but it wasn't as apparent as the first night because the Schnebly, I think it's Schnebly Road or whatever, but that was really apparent. I mean, it was so in your face, you can't deny this is what's happening. Um, and then
I mean,
we went
it's
to another
so
location on
clear.
another night. What's that?
It's so clear. Like
Yeah.
her, what she, the object she captured. Was it was it one or two? But
Yeah, the 3rd night, we were gonna try to communicate again, and it was a clear enough night, like, it cleared up, and we get out there, and as soon as we get out there, it was like immediately it all clouded over, and then we couldn't see as much. So,
yeah,
yeah, it was almost like, we were like, "Is this happening on purpose? They don't want us to see them tonight. They're probably tired of us." Like, "Oh, those people again." Yeah, but we had a great time. They say, it is really important. I agree. It is really important to be in a high loving space because there's so many different types of beings out there, and you want to connect to the ones that are really loving and high vibrational. And the loving, high vibrational ones won't even interact if you're not in that space.
yeah,
Um, but and if you're not in that space and you're trying to reach out and something does reach out and communicate or show itself, it may not necessarily be high vibrational,
yeah.
so
Well, it was just fascinating with Whitney's video. I mean, she's like talking to it, and it's like reacting.
yeah.
It's super cool. I didn't know you were on that trip with
Yeah,
her. That's
yeah, I was
cool.
running that trip, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, let me know if you go back.
Yeah, and actually Mount Shasta is on my list. I would love to do that, yeah. But
Yeah.
Sedona is always amazing too.
The I have a group in California, actually, that I'll be talking to very shortly, but they go look for UFOs there. and they've seen a lot of people have just seen stuff there, which is fascinating. And also, one of the guys in my group has a Bigfoot story, which I feel like there's a lot in California too, which is interesting.
I love that.
Yeah,
Bigfoot is fascinating to me as well. Yeah.
he said he didn't see it. He was walking, can't remember the name of the forest or the mountain range, but he was walking, was with his dog, and all of a sudden he his dog, like the hair stood up on the dog, and the back, the dog went to fight mode, which was kind of unusual. But he said this dog was sort of aggressive in that way, and like it was trying to protect him. And his dog wanted to jump over on this other side of the like cliff, kind of like he couldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden he heard a knock, like on a tree. Like
Yeah.
knocking is one of the phenomenon that you'll hear about sometimes.
Yep.
And he said whatever hit or made that knock on the tree in the middle of the forest where no one else was big. And he was like, this guy is one of the most incredible people I know. He's not someone that scares easily, but he was like, you just you read the tea leaves and you're like, okay, I'm out of here.
Right.
You don't
No,
have to
thank
tell
you.
me. I'm gonna walk back. And I think he had to walk back a few miles to his car where he had parked. And he said he could hear, this knocking as he was going back to his car. Like it was like letting him know, like, keep going. Like, yep, you're going in the right direction. So he
Wow.
never saw it, but he was like, yep, that's Bigfoot.
You just know. Wow.
Ruben Langdon, who has the show Interview with Extra Dimensionals, he lives in Big Bear, which is uh, out in California, and he has had um, sightings and the knocking with Bigfoot too, which is interesting. So
Yeah, that is really fascinating to me. I love all that. I've
yeah,
never had a Bigfoot experience personally, but
I'm okay not having one.
yeah,
Actually,
it's all scary.
I'm happy to hear people talk about their stories.
Yeah, yeah. I have a client who she told me about this, and I don't want to go too into it because it's a very personal thing, but she felt like her son had seen one, and he's not even necessarily a believer in any of this. And but afterwards, she asked me in a session, she was like, "Did this happen?" And I was like, "Oh, I think he saw something." And then they started having weird experiences in their house. And if I remember right, what I tuned into was it felt almost like a watcher of sorts, not like a watcher like you tend to hear of when someone says it's a watcher, but almost like a just checking in to see who these people were that saw that thing. That's how it
Uh-huh.
felt. And it didn't feel necessarily nefarious, but from what I remember, it just kind of felt like, who are these people and how could they see that? That's how it felt.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the closest thing to a Bigfoot experience I've ever gotten to was I had a client who thinks they saw something like that. So, but I don't
Yeah.
know what they saw, but it definitely felt like it was something they weren't supposed to see.
I can't remember where I heard it, but it said that Bigfoot has a sense of humor. It sort of knows when it could be seen and not, and can mess with people. And it sort of has that type of personality, which is just me saying that I heard that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I've heard
yeah.
other ones say that, sometimes they're actually more friendly and sometimes they're really not, so I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, oh, okay.
Well,
Peace and love.
anything more you want to add about portals or missing 411 or
No, and I know a lot of this was just us chit-chatting about really fun topics, but I think if anybody's interested, they should really research Missing 411 and David Paulides and really just look into these things, research some of the different UFO stories out there. Are a lot of UFO stories out there and things that people have come forth and talked about, really credible witnesses and people who've experienced things. Some of it's probably false, but a lot of it I think is true. And it's just, I think it's important to open our minds and our wisdom and understand there's so much more to all of this that our regular physical 3D reality can't explain. So,
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know or we've been misled about,
yeah.
and I think a lot of this stuff is gonna come out, and it's gonna be super interesting. Um, I know we gotta wrap up, but I found the old Unsolved Mysteries,
Oh, yeah. I used to love
series
that show.
on, um, Amazon Prime. You can watch it for free, and I watched the Roswell episode. It's one of the first episodes in the first season of that. I relearned all this stuff that I did not know, and just how the truth about things was twisted and manipulated, and it's fascinating because this is what that show was in, maybe the late '80s, so a lot
Yeah.
of these people were still alive who were being interviewed that were there, and so you got to see this again because, nowadays, it's like, "Well, this person said this or this account," and so it was interesting to go back in time and see that, but so it's there if anyone wants to watch it.
Yeah. Good stuff out there for sure.
Alright. Well, Jen, thank you very much for your insights and wisdom with these topics,
You
and,
too. This was fun.
thank you all for listening. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
We are so grateful that you joined us. Check out the description to learn more about us and also for additional resources to help you on your journey.